Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of The Terry Cole Show. That I want to start with a question. Were you taught that being sort of good at relationships meant being trusting? Being a trusting person? Trust first, ask questions later. Many of us were rewarded, especially as kids, for being agreeable, for being accommodating, right? For being easy to trust others, but never really taught how to trust ourselves. So if you're nodding your head yes, that's exactly what this episode is all about, right? Because trust is not blind loyalty. And I feel like for a lot of us, that's what we were taught. Trust, when you really think about it, is earned clarity. There's transparency when you can really trust someone. So in this episode, I'm going to be talking about all the ways that why we fall into the trap of being too trusting and how to sort of reel it back without becoming paranoid. Just best practices when it comes to new relationships and how to build trust in old relationships too. So if you happen to be new here, well, hi, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Terry Cole. I'm a licensed psychotherapist. I'm a relationship expert. I'm the author of Boundary Boss and Too Much, which you can get at hfcbook.com right now. This brand new book, well, not brand new, came out last October, brand new-ish. Welcome. We're a very friendly group. Before we get into it, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, please. Hit the bell icon so that you also get notified every time I roll out new stuff, which is every Tuesday and every Thursday. So I wouldn't want you to miss a thing because reality is I create this content for you, my friend. All right, so let's move it on into this episode on trust. I want you to think back. We need to sort of go back to our trust blueprint. What did we learn in our family of origin? So all of us, the same way that I talk about blueprints about many parts of our lives, you can have a love blueprint, you have boundary blueprints. This is a trust blueprint. So it's something that we learned how to trust or how not to trust in our family of origin. So in the guide that goes along with this episode, I'm going to give you questions that you guys can answer so you can start to get a snapshot of what you learned in your family of origin. So a couple of the questions: did the adults in your life keep their word? Did they do the things they said they were going to do? Because if they did, that builds trust. And if they didn't, that builds the opposite of trust. Did they respect confidentiality? Could you tell them something and they would keep it in confidence, or would they tell other people? Would you be betrayed? And all family systems, again, are different. Some there's lots of trust and some there's not. Everyone knows everyone's business. A lot of family systems are very enmeshed, so there was no privacy in an enmeshed family system. Was trust shown through actions? Or was trust sort of demanded without question? Meaning you were expected to trust the people in your family even if they were not trustworthy. But it's almost like a lot of family systems demand 100% loyalty, 100% trust. Think about in my own family, where I had 3 older sisters. We had each other's backs for sure, even if we fought, which of course we did, because 4 sisters within 6 years, yeah, somebody's going to fight. But loyalty to each other was of the utmost importance. So if somebody had a boyfriend situation, if the phone rang and it was the boyfriend and the sister whose boyfriend it was, I'm not here, you would never say she was there. You would say, no, actually, I haven't seen her. Like, without question. I wouldn't even later on ask why. It doesn't even matter. That's what she asked me to do. That's what I would do. So I wouldn't say it was blind loyalty in my family of origin. It was just a sisterly trust that, and I still have it with my sisters, that if the shit hits the fan, if I really need them, especially my sister Kathy, who lives close to me, the shit doesn't even have to hit the fan. She's there, no questions asked, especially when life gets rough. We've gone through losses, the death of one of my nieces, my oldest sister needed a liver transplant. Like, the entire family rallies around that person. I mean, when my mother got sick, just rearranged lives to accommodate that, and not out of guilt, but out of loyalty and out of love. And I think that there's a lot of motivation within family systems. My family system certainly isn't perfect, but I'd say, generally speaking, it's pretty healthy. I feel like we're motivated a lot of times by love, but also by devotion, right? What matters to you in your life? And when it comes to trust, this is something that, and there'll be questions for you to answer in the guide as well, about self-trust, because this is where it all begins. How our blueprint, how our trust blueprint, whatever one we got in life. Like I remember when I moved into New York City, I moved from a very safe little town in New Jersey. We didn't lock our house. We didn't lock our cars. And I remember the first night I slept in my new apartment, my car got robbed. And I had a whole bunch of stuff in my car, brand new clothing, of course, ridiculous, because I didn't have any experience. I was very naive. And I remember being crushed and thinking, I was in my early 20s. And I remember thinking, who would do that? Meaning, who would rob stuff out of your car? And obviously the answer is a whole lot of people, Tara. But I was 21 and just living in the city. I didn't know anything. Your innocence also gets taken away once you've lived in more places than a very insulated little town in New Jersey. But my own blueprint, I feel like I learned the hard way that not everyone is as trustworthy as I am. But again, this is where, and I've talked about this a bunch of times, if you could come to the YouTube channel, is about positive projection. And this is a perfect example of just because you wouldn't do it doesn't mean someone else wouldn't. And I think that when it comes to when you're a trusting person, meaning you're a trustworthy person, we can have this tendency to project those trustworthy qualities, those good qualities, onto other people, even though we don't really know that they possess them. And of course, I have found out the hard way, and I'm sure many of you have as well, that if you're overly trusting, you may not be discerning about who you should be trusting. In the courts, it's supposedly innocent until proven guilty. But I feel like with trust, there's a process of trust being earned, not assumed. So some of you come from family systems where it's like trust until they give you a reason not to. And I feel like that's a little naive. That's sort of a myth around trust. Sometimes people will look at questioning as a lack of trust, but a lot of times it's your intuition about someone. And especially when I was younger, I might get that hit of intuition, but then I wouldn't listen to it because I didn't know how to draw boundaries, or I was afraid to have the conversation, or whatever the reason is. And another belief could be that as good girls, we don't ask too many questions. It seems rude. I mean, I have clients who were afraid to get a second opinion because they didn't want to offend their oncologist. That is a good girl syndrome that can be really devastating to your health. So again, trust is something that has to be earned. And a lot of us were taught all of this disordered stuff around trust. And what happens? What is it? What do these behaviors lead to when we have this disordered relationship to trust, or that we're overly trusting, overfunctioning on our relationships, staying in toxic dynamics too long, betraying yourself because you are trying to appear trusting to the other person, or you don't want them to be offended by the fact that you don't trust them. Again, it's so complicated. But I think that we need to think about trust as something that it is a radical act. Trusting other people is like a radical act in vulnerability. And so I don't take that lightly, even at this stage of my life, which is why I always like to slow it down in relationships and even new friendships. We don't have to have insta intimacy because it doesn't even exist. So when you meet new people, or if you're dating someone, let their character be revealed to you over time. And again, I'm not saying assume all people are dishonest assholes. It's definitely not that. But I feel like so much of the time, as women in particular, we're almost auditioning for this low maintenance woman role. Like, I'm easy breezy, I'm the cool girl. That's really not trust. That's playing a role. That's not being actually trusting. If you have a gut instinct about something, but you don't say anything because you don't want to seem high maintenance, that is really just self-abandonment disguised as me. I'm easy breezy, low maintenance. There's nothing great about being low maintenance. I think we've been sold a bill of goods. Makes it easier on other people. I don't think I'm high maintenance. I think I'm just regular maintenance. Just a regular person who has the right to have questions and thoughts and ideas and instincts. And that's who you are too. But keep in mind, there's no gold star handed out for being low maintenance. Because we really have to get down to the truth about trust. Real trust is earned over time. The same way that there is no insta intimacy, there should not be instant trust. So real trust earned over time, not assumed. So what does it look like when someone is a trustworthy person? Where you should trust someone is that they are consistent over time. And a lot of times when we get into those fast and furious relationships, we're mistaking intensity for something else, for trustworthiness. But intensity and someone's consistent trustworthy behavior, those are different things. Another thing that to create trusting relationships is you need to have aligned values. And I feel so much of the time people can get trauma bonded in their relationships, and it can feel meant to be destiny because it takes on a life of its own. And yet, shared trauma is not aligned values. Those are different things. Trusting relationships will repair after rupture, right? The person knows how to come back together. You both do. Not sort of going into that world of pretend that that thing that happened last night didn't happen. And another part of a trusting relationship is there has to be transparent motives, right? You both have to be able to tell the truth about why you're doing what you're doing. A lot of my therapy clients would come into therapy and be, well, what do you think this means? They did this or they said this. So it's almost they're decoding their person's behavior 24/7 as opposed to just asking. Because if we're never positive of somebody's motives, how can we ever relax, right? Real trust, it doesn't have to always be super comfortable, a real trusting relationship, but it really does always have to be clear, right? You know where you stand with that person. You know how they feel. And if you don't know where you stand or how they feel about you, that doesn't mean they don't care about you. It doesn't mean that they couldn't develop into something. But if they can't communicate that, I have to put them in the category of not necessarily being emotionally trustworthy. Because you have to be able to relax. Think about one of the things that I always say to my therapy clients is that in a trusting relationship, you will not be walking on eggshells. In a trusting relationship, your nervous system can be relaxed. In a trusting relationship, you don't have to be afraid of the other person. I remember after breaking up with a particular boyfriend, I made a vow to myself. And he wasn't abusive, he was jealous. So there was control issues and stuff like that, but I wouldn't categorize it as horribly abusive. But I made a commitment to myself after that relationship ended that I would never again date someone that I feared. I feared his disapproval. He was always tracking where I was. He was always jealous of other people. It was just so fucking exhausting and not fun. But that is something that I would love it. If you've been in relationships where you feel afraid or you're walking on eggshells, that why don't we raise the bar? And if you're in a relationship right now where you feel afraid, there are still things that you can do. And I'm not talking about I'm not talking about a physically abusive relationship or one where there's domestic violence. I'm just talking about fear. Is it fear of disapproval? You have to look at your own motives. Get clear about your own motives. Why are you in a relationship that you feel this way? And it could be familiar. It could be repeating relationships realities, as I talk about. But there's things for you to decode within yourself, because you deserve to be in a relationship where you can relax, where you can be yourself. So make sure you grab your downloadable guide that I created for this. It's basically a trust audit for you to get clear on how to trust others without abandoning yourself in the process. And the last thing I want to say about that I think is really crucial, is that self-trust comes first. Because we can't trust others well if we don't trust ourselves. So if you can't trust yourself to recognize red flags, or to set boundaries, or to leave when you need to, or to speak up when something's off, then how can you trust the other person? Because you're both sort of living in a relationship of pretend, of what if. So I want to encourage you to get honest with yourself. And this isn't just for romantic relationships, you guys. This can be for friendships as well. When you think about your relationship, look at the relationship field that you have. How do you feel in your relationships? Do you feel like other people have your best interest in mind? And this is your friends, your siblings, your partner, your people that you work with. Do you have a lot of trustworthy people in your life? Or do you not? Do you feel that you don't have any trustworthy people in your life? And it could be somewhere in between as well. But what you have to think about is that if you feel that most people around trustworthy, you are the common denominator in these relationships. So we've got to sort of go back to the self-trust thing, because there's so much projection that we do. I find that the least trusting people in my life, the people who are the most paranoid, who are positive everyone is out to screw them, are the least trustworthy people. They're the people who would screw someone over for $1. So I can always see it so clearly, the projection that happens. So a lot of times when we're not trusting in relationships, it's because we don't trust ourselves to have our own backs. We don't trust ourselves to speak up when something is wrong. So that is the beginning. So I'm going to give you some ideas in the guide, terrycole.com/guide. And you guys, when it comes down to it, it's not about blame. That's not what we're into. It's about reclaiming your power. And I feel like with trust, if we are to be trustworthy to ourselves, we need to be really discerning about who we make ourselves vulnerable to. And someone making themselves open or raw and vulnerable to you doesn't necessarily mean they're trustworthy. They might just be emotionally dumping on you. I mean, real vulnerability can be beautiful, but there has to be discernment, right? So what does real trust look like, right? It means that someone else can hold your truth without shaming, right? Is emotionally reliable and consistent, as we said before, and shows up even when it's inconvenient. And just keep it in your mind that you are building trust over time, one step after one step. And you don't owe anybody instant trust. You don't. You owe them discernment. You're allowed to take your time. You're allowed to trust your gut. You're allowed to leave the old definitions of what that used to be behind and build something new that works for you and the life you want to live and the relationships you want to have. So to get the guide, go to terrycole.com/guide. I hope that this resonated with you, and that if you had a downloaded trust blueprint that was handed down to you from previous generations that didn't work, one that you have not consciously chosen, that you realize that by doing this real trust audit, you can shift the way that you relate in your relationships. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I so appreciate it. Go to terrycole.com/guide. And I hope you have the most amazing week. And as always, take care of you.